For over 30 years, Northern Ireland was consumed by the Troubles, a conflict that claimed over 3,500 lives. During that time, the Irish Republican Army planted hundreds of bombs in cities and towns across Northern Ireland and England. Enniskillen was one of those towns. On Remembrance Sunday in 1987, the IRA planted a bomb that killed 11 local residents. I was born in Enniskillen, County Fermanagh, 2 days after the Remembrance Day bomb. Growing up in a town scarred by such a despicable act was quite weird. But as a so-called ceasefire baby, somebody who grew up after the IRA called a truce in 1994, my outlook for the future was optimistic, positive, but that wasn't the case for everybody. The bombing injured dozens, and in a town of just over 11,000 people in 1987, the impact was deeply personal. Everybody knew somebody who was affected. The Troubles may be officially over, but the Poppy Day bomb remains one of its biggest unsolved crimes. No one's ever been held to account. I've travelled back to Enniskillen to find out how that morning changed people's lives forever, and how many of those affected are still searching for the truth almost 40 years later. In front of us is a building known as the Clinton Centre now, but what in the late 80s was known as the reading rooms. But it was inside that building, just behind that gable wall, that the IRA planted a bomb on Remembrance Weekend in 1987. And when the bomb exploded, that building, the gable wall, effectively collapsed, and it did so on top of all those members of the public who were standing in front of it. One of the victims that day was 49-year-old Samuel Galt, a former police officer. His daughter-in-law, Cathy, was a young wife and new mother, working alongside her husband in the Ulster Defence Regiment.
Sammy was wonderful. He was a friend to everybody, doted on our little newborn. The night before the Enniskillen bomb, he came round and he babysat Andrew. Keith was obviously working, and I went off to the shop and I came back. And then Sammy said his goodbyes, and he drove up round the park and he came back and he stopped the car and he got out and he said, "You look after that little baby." And that was the last words that Sammy spoke to me.
On the morning of November the 8th, Cathy, her husband Keith, and their 8-month-old son were hurrying to the Remembrance Day ceremony. They were running late. As they headed towards what is now the Clinton Centre, the bomb went off.
Whenever everything sort of settled, then my husband just got up and he looked to see where I was and looked to see where Andrew was, and then he said, "I need to go forward because my dad," he says, "my dad's dead, my dad's dead."
20 miles away in Tullyhommen, another IRA bomb targeting a Poppy Day parade failed to detonate. This was the only time the IRA had targeted a Remembrance Day event. We travelled to the Republic of Ireland to speak to Oisin, a former IRA member from County Fermanagh. That's not his real name, and you won't hear his real voice. He wants to remain anonymous.
Bloody Sunday was the straw that broke the camel's back. I went and made it known that I was willing to join. Yeah, our mission was to attack members of the Crown Forces. We were all committed to what we called honourable military action. I felt that was participating in a resistance against the old colonial oppressor.
After joining, one of the first tasks he was given was to go to Enniskillen on Remembrance Sunday and to assess the possibility of an attack at the cenotaph.
We sat on the steps of the Fort Hill Pleasure Ground. We had a pretty clear view of the proceedings. In particular, where a lot of the spectators stood was with their backs to the walls of the old reading rooms. That never even crossed our mind. And the very fact that we'd seen Boy Scouts, Girl Guides, Boys Brigades are all part of this communal celebration. So it was just a big no, no, no.
The IRA have accepted responsibility and have expressed their deepest regret at the catastrophic effects of this action.
Anyone who had scoped that would have known there was no way to avoid civilian casualties by placing a bomb where they actually placed it.
The search for those responsible began immediately.
I hope, well, two things immediately. First, that everyone will concentrate their efforts on finding these people who've done it.
On the day of the attack, 7 houses were raided, but no arrests were made. Over the next 2 years, a total of 10 men would be arrested on alleged terror offences, but ultimately all would be released without charge. And less than 3 weeks after the bomb, the police allegedly took the decision to downgrade the investigation. Nobody was ever charged over the bombing of Enniskillen, or the planting of a bomb in Tullyhommen. For the victims and families, there has been no justice.
My whole life changed. My husband became a different person. He obviously suffered with post-traumatic stress. He wasn't able to keep down a full-time job. Our lives were very different to what they should have been.
David Bolton was a social worker and has become an expert on trauma. He was there that day, helping families in the local hospital.
My memory of the hospital was of the dust on people's clothes, but also in the air and on the floor, and of the blood on the floor. There is a danger that the victims of conflict, rather than being helped by peace, become victims of peace because they get left behind. There's also the danger of, in one way or another, either traumatic effects on second generations or destructive narratives being transmitted to future generations.
This afternoon, Samuel Galt, a retired police sergeant, was buried after a service at St McCartan's Cathedral.
I suppose out of a sense of fairness, people want and expect the state to get to the bottom of these kind of events, to find out who carried them out.
We're never going to get any justice. I think they just like to brush it under the carpet. I do think that we have been forgotten.
The families of the victims deserve to have the truth. The leadership of the Republican movement, or so-called Republican movement, they negotiated the Good Friday Agreement. They made little provision for truth and reconciliation or for truth recovery.
The Troubles came to an end with the signing of the Good Friday Agreement in 1998. While it brought peace to the province, the deal didn't address how to deliver answers to those affected by the violence of the previous 3 decades. Getting to the truth of what happened in Enniskillen that day has proved difficult.
As much as I'd like to sit down with somebody, I probably would only do that if there was amnesty. But I wouldn't like to see amnesty. First thing I would like to see, I know I'm contradicting myself here, but first and foremost, if somebody was to come forward, I would like to see them prosecuted.
IRA members have said that without amnesty from prosecution, there has never been an incentive to come forward with information.
If people want to get to the truth, there'll have to be a general amnesty. There'll have to be an amnesty for, well, not just people like myself, but the British squaddies.
Since that day, I've never been back to the War Memorial. I haven't it in my heart to forgive them.
The achievement of justice doesn't necessarily guarantee peace of mind. And sometimes the pursuit of justice can displace the necessary task of grieving.
I just can't bring myself to go back to that place.
It's been almost 4 decades since the Enniskillen bomb, and victims are still fighting for answers. But recent government pledges might finally change that. The first ever cross-border investigation into Enniskillen could now happen after the British and Irish governments announced laws to tackle the legacy of the Troubles. To many people, the Enniskillen bombing remains an open wound, and that just can't be ignored. That injustice needs to be addressed, and their questions need to be answered.